They tell you to seek connection, to build bridges, to find strength in numbers. They whisper of the inherent loneliness of the solitary soul, painting isolation as a void, a weakness. But what if the deepest silence holds a power they dare not speak of? What if the very act of standing alone, in profound and deliberate solitude, is not a retreat, but the forging of an invincible weapon? Prepare to shed the illusions of collective comfort and step onto a path where true power is found, not in the crowd, but within the unyielding fortress of the self. The human spirit, in its raw and untamed state, recoils from the precipice of true solitude. It is a primal fear, ingrained deep within our social fabric. To be alone is to be vulnerable, to be without protection, to be weak. Society, in its myriad forms, reinforces this apprehension, weaving narratives of dependency and collective strength. We are told that our worth is often measured by the breadth of our connections, the depth of our bonds, the size of our tribe. When faced with disappointment, betrayal, or the crushing weight of unmet expectations, the immediate instinct for many is to recoil, to lash out, or to seek solace in new, often superficial alliances. This reactive solitude, born from pain, is the conventional weakness, a desperate attempt to shield a wounded ego rather than to fortify the spirit. Consider the archetype of the lone wolf. On the surface, it embodies a captivating allure, the individual who cuts ties, adopting an aura of cold indifference, viewing the dependency of others as a vulnerability to be eradicated. This superficial interpretation of solitude promises an escape from the complexities of human interaction, from the sting of betrayal, from the burden of obligation. It seduces with the fantasy of building impenetrable emotional walls, believing that invincibility stems from physical and emotional isolation, a fortress where no one can ever truly touch or wound you again. This is often an arrogant stance, a self-justified disdain for the herd, a belief that one is superior precisely because they stand apart. It can even manifest as a form of vengeance, a withdrawal to train and plan, with the ultimate goal of returning to prove one's value to those who doubted or rejected them, to show them the error of their ways. This path, however, is fraught with peril, a subtle deception. It is not true strength, but a brittle armor forged from resentment and fear. To withdraw in reaction to hurt is merely to allow the external world to dictate your internal state. It is to cede control, becoming a prisoner of your past pains, using isolation as a desperate coping mechanism rather than a strategic tool. The lone wolf, who isolates out of bitterness, seeking to prove a point, remains fundamentally tethered to those they despise. Their strength, if it can be called that, is derived from comparison, from the very validation they outwardly reject. Their solitude is a reaction, not an action, a retreat, not a strategic advance. They are not free. They are merely alone, often consumed by the very emotions they seek to escape. Their supposed strength is a hollow facade, easily shattered by the slightest tremor of true self-doubt, for it lacks an internal foundation. They have mistaken the absence of others for the presence of power, a critical miscalculation in the grand strategy of life. This reactive approach, common as it may be, is a strategic blunder of the highest order. It is akin to a general who, upon suffering a minor skirmish, retreats deep into the mountains, not to regroup and strategize, but to lick their wounds and curse their enemies. Such a general might survive, but they will never conquer. Their movements are dictated by the enemy's previous actions, making them predictable, their defenses focused on past attacks rather than future threats. This general is a victim, forever reacting, never truly controlling the narrative or the flow of battle. Their solitude is a prison, not a sanctuary. It breeds stagnation, not growth, bitterness, not wisdom. The true strategist knows that reacting is losing, that true power lies in deliberate, calculated action, in shaping the environment rather than being shaped by it. Here, the ancient wisdom of Sun Tzu emerges from the shadows, offering a path less traveled, a philosophy that transcends mere reaction. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. This profound principle, often misunderstood, is the key to unlocking the true invincible strength of being alone. Sun Tzu teaches us that true power is not found in confrontation, nor in desperate flight, but in the deliberate control of one's environment and, crucially, one's perception. The enemy here is not just external adversaries, but the internal chaos of unmanaged emotions, unexamined fears, and external dependencies that bind us. The philosopher general understood that the greatest battles are often won before they are ever fought, not with swords and arrows, but with foresight, strategy, and an unparalleled understanding of oneself and one's position. The solitude he champions is not an escape from the world, but the most vital training ground for the true general, the general of one's own life. It is where the most critical battle is won, the battle for the self. This is not about building walls to keep others out, but about constructing an unshakable foundation within. The true path of the strategist embraces solitude not as a consequence of pain, but as a deliberate choice, a sacred space for cultivation and discernment. Here, silence is not an emptiness to be filled, but a fertile ground for growth. Observation, both internal and external, becomes the primary weapon. In the quiet depths of self-imposed isolation, free from the incessant noise and demands of the world, one begins to see with crystalline clarity. The distractions fade, the social masks crumble, and the truth of one's own being stands exposed. This is where the initial work of the master begins, to observe, to understand, to map the terrain of one's own mind and spirit. This deliberate engagement with solitude transforms it from a perceived weakness into a formidable strength. It is a strategic retreat, not born of fear, but of profound foresight. It is the act of stepping back from the fray not to hide, but to gain perspective, to identify the true nature of the challenges ahead, and to cultivate the inner resources necessary to overcome them. The true strategist understands that to be truly powerful, one must first be truly self-possessed, and self-possession is not granted by others. It is forged in the crucible of self-awareness. This is the distinction that separates the weak from the truly strong. The weak fear solitude and either flee from it into superficial connections or retreat into it out of bitterness. The strong, guided by ancient wisdom, actively seek solitude as a forge, a laboratory, a strategic command center. They understand that the power they seek lies not in the validation of others, but in the unwavering command of their own being. This is the first and most crucial lesson in the art of the invincible self. For solitude, when correctly understood and embraced, is not a void but a crucible, hardening the spirit until it becomes an unassailable fortress. Comment, I fortify my inner citadel to master this principle, and subscribe for the next lessons on the art of strategic self-mastery. Having cast aside the illusion of reactive isolation, we now delve into the core tenets of Sun Tzu's philosophy, revealing how the deliberate embrace of solitude transmutes into an active, strategic force, an invisible warfare waged not against others, but within the very fabric of one's own existence. This is where the profound silence of being alone becomes a potent instrument, shaping reality from the inside out, aligning with ancient principles of strategic dominance. It is in this crucible of self-reflection that the individual, like a seasoned general, refines their tactics, preparing for engagements long before they arise. The first, and arguably most foundational principle for the strategist embracing solitude is the mastery of the inner terrain. Sun Tzu declared, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." While often applied to external adversaries, its deepest resonance is found in the journey of self-discovery. Solitude, true solitude, is the ultimate mirror. It is the absence of external stimuli, social expectations, and the constant hum of validation that forces an unvarnished confrontation with one's authentic self. Without the constant need to react, to impress, to conform, or to deflect, the clamor of the external world diminishes, allowing the internal landscape to emerge with stark clarity. Imagine yourself as a seasoned cartographer tasked with mapping an unknown continent. In the bustling marketplace, amidst the clamor of merchants and the whispers of gossips, such a task would be impossible. You would retreat to a quiet chamber, spreading your scrolls, consulting ancient texts, and allowing your mind to wander through the vast expanse. Similarly, the strategist in solitude undertakes the profound task of mapping their own psyche. This is where fears, long buried beneath layers of social performance, surface. This is where unexamined weaknesses, often compensated for by external support, become glaringly apparent. And this is also where dormant strengths, forgotten aspirations, and authentic desires, suffocated by the demands of others, begin to breathe anew. This intimate self-assessment is not a pleasant journey for the faint of heart. It requires a ruthless honesty, a willingness to confront shadows and illusions. Yet it is precisely this unflinching gaze that forms the bedrock of an invincible spirit. When you understand every contour of your mental landscape, its valleys of doubt, its mountains of ambition, its rivers of emotion, its hidden caves of vulnerability, you leave no blind spots for external forces to exploit. A general whose fortress has a known, unaddressed weakness invites attack. A person who understands their own psychological vulnerabilities can proactively fortify them, rendering them impervious to the emotional skirmishes of the world. This profound self-knowledge liberates one from the need for external validation. For you become your own most trusted advisor, your own most rigorous critic, and your own most unwavering champion. The strength derived from this internal cartography is not something that can be given or taken away. It is intrinsically yours. It grants an unparalleled mental resilience, making you inscrutable and unassailable in your convictions. The second pivotal principle, closely intertwined with the first, is the reduction of critical dependencies, an echo of Sun Tzu's warning against reliance on fragile supply lines. An army that depends on long and vulnerable supply lines will perish. In the context of the individual, our emotional and psychological supply lines often extend outwards, seeking validation, approval, motivation, and even a sense of identity from external sources. We become reliant on compliments to feel worthy, on company to feel whole, on external challenges to feel motivated. These are precisely the supply lines that an adversary or even the unpredictable chaos of life can target and sever. Deliberate solitude serves as a rigorous training ground for severing these critical dependencies. When you are alone, truly alone, you are forced to confront the absence of external validation. There is no one to praise your efforts, no one to commiserate with your setbacks, no one to affirm your choices. In this stark environment, the self must learn to generate its own sustenance. You become your own source of approbation, understanding that your worth is intrinsic, not conferred. You cultivate internal motivation, driven by your own purpose rather than the fleeting incentives of others. You discover your own wellspring of comfort and resilience, realizing that emotional stability is an inside job, not an external import. Consider a military unit operating deep behind enemy lines. Their strength lies not in their ability to call for endless reinforcements, but in their capacity for self-sufficiency. Every soldier is trained to survive, to improvise, to draw upon internal reserves. Similarly, the individual who has embraced strategic solitude learns to operate with this same level of self-reliance. Their emotional stability becomes self-generated, their drive self-propelled. They are no longer vulnerable to the whims of others' opinions, to the shifting sands of social acceptance, or to the emotional turbulence of external relationships. Their strength becomes invincible precisely because it is generated internally, an inexhaustible spring that cannot be poisoned or cut off by any external force. This self-reliance imbues the individual with an extraordinary autonomy, making them immune to the subtle manipulations and psychological pressures that bind others to a path not of their choosing. Finally, the third strategic pillar forged in the quietude of solitude is the formulation of unwavering strategy and clarity of mission. To a general who plans strategy and the din of battle is lost, he retreats to his tent. Solitude is the general's tent for your life, the sacred space where the noise of daily demands, the opinions of others, and the urgent but often trivial matters of the world are silenced. In this undisturbed sanctuary, the mind gains the precious commodity of crystalline clarity. This is not merely about introspection, it is about strategic planning. Here you are not just examining who you are, but defining who you will become and what you will achieve. What is your ultimate objective? What are the true battles you wish to engage in? What resources, internal and external, do you possess? What are the potential obstacles, and how can they be circumvented before they even materialize? The general does not devise battle plans on the battlefield. They withdraw, study maps, analyze intelligence, and formulate a comprehensive strategy. Likewise, the individual in strategic solitude leverages this quiet time to delineate their life's mission with precision. When you emerge from this period of strategic solitude, your mission is not a vague aspiration, but a meticulously crafted blueprint. Your purpose is not a fleeting desire, but an unyielding directive. This clarity acts as an impenetrable shield against the myriad distractions and trivialities that derail others. The small tactics of the world, insults, manipulations, petty dramas, fleeting trends, become what they truly are: insignificant noise. They lose their power to sway or destabilize because your internal compass is set, your trajectory fixed. You are not tossed about by every gust of wind because you have determined your own course. The invincibility of being alone, therefore, is not about hating people or permanently isolating oneself. It is about a profound, deliberate engagement with the self, a strategic retreat to construct an inner core so powerful, so self-sufficient, and so clear in its purpose that when you re-engage with the world, you do so from a position of absolute plenitude, not of need. You are no longer affected by the whims or opinions of others because you no longer require anything from them for your fundamental stability or sense of worth. You interact by choice, not by craving or dependency, and this truly is the most profound and unassailable form of power. This is the invisible warfare, won in the heart and mind long before any external engagement, rendering you an immovable force in a world of constant flux. Emerging from the strategic solitude of the previous phase, the individual is no longer merely alone. They are transformed. The quiet crucible has forged a new being, a strategist whose internal landscape is meticulously mapped and fortified. Now, the focus shifts from the internal preparation to the external manifestation of this cultivated power. This part delves into how the mastery achieved in solitude translates into dominance on the psychological battlefield, affecting not only one's own composure, but also shaping the perceptions and reactions of others. It is about understanding that true power is not exerted through overt displays of force, but through a subtle, pervasive influence that subtly reconfigures the environment. The first, and perhaps most crucial aspect of this mastery, is the internal war waged and won. Before any external engagement, the true strategist must conquer their own inner demons. The period of profound solitude discussed in Part 2 was not merely for self-discovery, but for self-conquest. Emotions, those volatile forces that can derail the most brilliant plans, were meticulously examined, understood, and brought under an ironclad discipline. Rage, that blinding fire; pride, that swelling tide of arrogance; impatience, that insidious whisper urging premature action. These are the initial adversaries. Sun Tzu warned, "A general who is easily angered will be easily defeated." The master, having spent countless hours in the quiet chambers of their own mind, has learned to observe these emotions without succumbing to their tyranny. This is not to say the strategist becomes devoid of feeling. On the contrary, they understand the nature of their emotions with such precision that they can choose when and how to engage with them, rather than being swept away by their currents. They have fought and won the internal war, achieving a state of detached equanimity. This allows for a clarity of thought that is unclouded by personal bias or reactive impulse. Every decision is made not from a place of emotional urgency, but from a calculated assessment of the strategic landscape. The first victory, always, is over oneself. This internal discipline grants an immense advantage, for while others are slaves to their passions, the master of solitude operates with the serene precision of a finely tuned instrument. Their calm is infectious, their composure unwavering, creating an aura of unshakable authority that subtly destabilizes those who rely on emotional cues to gauge strength. Building upon this inner fortitude is the art of shaping others' perceptions. The strategist understands that perception is reality, and that the most potent form of influence is not through direct command, but through the deliberate cultivation of how one is seen. Having severed their reliance on external validation in solitude, the master no longer seeks to be loved or even explicitly feared. Their aim is more sophisticated, to be perceived as calm, calculated, capable, an enigmatic force to be respected and reckoned with. This perception is not accidental, it is meticulously crafted. Sun Tzu's concept of appearing weak when strong and strong when weak finds its deepest application here. The strategist who has cultivated an invincible inner core does not need to boast or overtly display their power. In fact, they might adopt a quiet demeanor, allowing others to underestimate them. This creates a psychological advantage, encouraging adversaries to drop their guard, to reveal their true intentions or to make rash moves based on a flawed assessment. Conversely, in moments where an overt display of competence is necessary, the calm, measured actions of the master carry an amplified weight, precisely because they are not typically given to theatrics. This mastery of perception extends to every interaction. The words chosen are precise, measured, and often sparse. The silence held is not empty, but pregnant with meaning, forcing others to fill the void with their own anxieties and assumptions. The strategist understands that in a world accustomed to noise and bluster, quiet confidence is a disconcerting anomaly. It signals a depth that cannot be easily fathomed, a self-sufficiency that does not require external approval. This carefully managed external image becomes a psychological weapon, creating an impression of immense power that precedes any actual engagement. People will defer, hesitate, or align themselves based not on what you say, but on what you subtly convey through your composed demeanor and self-contained strength. This power is pervasive, like an unseen current, guiding the flow of events in the strategist's favor. Finally, the cumulative effect of this internal mastery and perception management culminates in the cultivation of an unassailable reputation. Every action, every silence, every choice, no matter how seemingly insignificant, contributes to this grand tapestry. A reputation is not built overnight. It is forged over time, brick by silent brick, through consistent demonstration of core principles honed in solitude. The strategist's reputation becomes their most formidable ally, an unseen shadow that enters the room before they do, influencing interactions before a single word is spoken. This reputation is not based on fleeting popularity or superficial charm. It is built on unwavering integrity, on a quiet competence, and on an observable absence of need. People learn, through direct experience or through the whispers of rumor, that this individual is not easily swayed, not easily manipulated, and not easily provoked. They realize that this person operates from a foundation of internal strength, making external pressures largely ineffective. This creates a powerful deterrent, subtly shaping the actions of others. Potential adversaries will think twice before engaging, knowing that they are dealing with someone whose mind is clear, whose resolve is unshakable, and whose moves are always calculated. Imagine the historical figures of immense influence who commanded respect not through boisterous demands, but through a quiet, almost intimidating presence. Their reputation preceded them, silencing detractors and solidifying alliances. This is the power cultivated by the master of solitude. Their very presence becomes a statement of self-sufficiency, a testament to the fact that they are whole unto themselves. They do not seek to be loved or feared. They seek to be respected as an autonomous, self-governing entity, whose actions are driven by an internal compass, not external pressures. This reputation, forged in the fires of self-mastery and projected through deliberate perception management, becomes an extension of their invincible strength, an omnipresent force that ensures the psychological battlefield is always tilted in their favor, long before any overt conflict arises. This is the profound elegance of Sun Tzu's philosophy applied to the individual, to win without fighting, by creating an environment where victory is a foregone conclusion. You have journeyed through the desolate plains of conventional weakness, forged your inner citadel in the fires of strategic solitude, and mastered the subtle art of the psychological battlefield. Now, as we stand on the precipice of true power, Before we unveil how this unshakable force manifests in decisive action and the creation of enduring tranquility, ensure your dedication by subscribing. The profound wisdom that follows is reserved for those committed to wielding genuine, self-mastered influence. The preceding stages, from the initial retreat into strategic solitude to the meticulous cultivation of internal strength and the subtle manipulation of external perception, culminate in this final crucial phase: execution and timing, the decisive stroke. For the master strategist, a strike is rarely a violent, overt confrontation. It is instead a swift, precise, and often almost imperceptible maneuver, executed with impeccable timing when the circumstances are most favorable, and the adversary, be it a person, a situation, or a challenge, is at its most vulnerable, often due to its own inherent flaws or missteps. Sun Tzu elucidates, the quality of decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon, which enables it to strike and destroy its victim. This analogy speaks volumes. The falcon does not engage in a drawn-out struggle. It conserves energy, observes, calculates the perfect moment, and then descends with an unstoppable, singular focus. Similarly, the individual who has cultivated the invincible strength of being alone operates not from impulse but from a deeply ingrained sense of opportune moments. Their actions are not reactions, but meticulously planned interventions, often appearing effortless because the groundwork has been laid with such diligence. This decisive action is not about brute force, it is about leverage. Having understood the inner terrain, Part 2, and projected an unassailable reputation, Part 3, the strategist knows precisely where to apply pressure, or more often, where to simply allow events to unfold in their favor. The strike might be a perfectly articulated statement, delivered with gravitas and devoid of emotional baggage, that instantly reconfigures a conversation. It could be a strategic withdrawal from a losing proposition, leaving others to scramble in its wake. Or it might be the audacious pursuit of a long-held ambition, executed with such unwavering certainty that it sweeps aside all opposition, not through combat, but through sheer, quiet momentum. The key is that the strategist's power is not derived from struggling against resistance, but from flowing around it, exploiting its weaknesses, and then, at the zenith of opportunity, acting with surgical precision. The enemy is often defeated by its own hubris, its own reactive tendencies, or its own lack of internal fortitude, against which the strategist's calculated calm stands in stark contrast. This is the ultimate expression of winning without fighting. The engagement is so perfectly timed and subtly executed that resistance feels futile, rendering conflict unnecessary. The blow is not against an adversary's body, but against their will, their narrative, their perceived advantage. It is the moment when the reality you have silently cultivated now undeniably asserts itself. Following this decisive, often subtle stroke comes the phase of consolidation and the aftermath. True victory is not marked by celebration or public acclaim, for those are fleeting external validations that the master strategist has long transcended. Instead, the true measure of success lies in the new reality that the action creates. The strategist does not exult, they observe. They watch with an objective, detached gaze as the consequences of their deliberate actions, or often their strategic inactions, ripple through the environment. The focus is not on personal glory, but on the enduring shift in the landscape, a shift that aligns with their deeper purpose. This period of consolidation is about securing the gains, not by exerting continuous effort, but by allowing the natural laws of cause and effect to solidify the desired outcome. The reputation forged in solitude now acts as a silent enforcer. Others understand, without explicit declaration, that challenging this individual is an act of folly. The goal is not merely to win a single engagement, but to establish a new equilibrium, a lasting peace on one's own terms. This peace is characterized by a significant reduction in friction, a deterrence of future challenges, and an environment where one's autonomy and purpose can flourish unimpeded. Threats simply dissipate or never fully materialize because the strategic foundation is so solid. The strategist understands that a battle won only to be refought later is no true victory. Therefore, the outcome of their decisive action is designed to create a long-term, self-sustaining advantage. This is achieved by establishing an undeniable precedent, by demonstrating a level of foresight and control that makes future opposition seem pointless. The lingering impact of their actions becomes a silent guardian, protecting their interests without further engagement. This is the power that does not need to declare itself, for it is self-evident in the new order it has manifested. Finally, we arrive at the philosophical conclusion, the nature of true power. What has been unveiled is not a guide to manipulation for personal gain, but a profound blueprint for self-mastery and enduring influence. The invincible strength of being alone is not about social isolation, but about achieving a state of complete internal sovereignty. It is about becoming so fundamentally grounded in your own being, so clear in your purpose, and so self-sufficient in your emotional and psychological landscape that the presence or absence of others becomes irrelevant to your fundamental stability and trajectory. The ultimate power is not found in controlling armies nor in swaying the masses, but in controlling oneself to such an extent that your very presence, your very being, subtly reshapes the world around you. It is the power that renders conflict irrelevant, because your internal fortress is unassailable, your purpose unwavering, and your dependencies non-existent. This is the throne that no one dares to approach, not out of fear of your aggression, but out of profound respect for your unshakable autonomy, your serene confidence, and the undeniable force of your self-mastered existence. The master strategist, forged in the crucible of solitude, moves through the world not as a reactive participant, but as a deliberate architect of their own reality. They seek not dominance over others, but sovereignty over self, understanding that from this internal command flows an external influence that is truly invincible. This is the enduring lesson from Sun Tzu, distilled through the profound wisdom of strategic solitude, to become whole, complete, and utterly self-reliant, thus achieving a state of being that is beyond challenge, a force that silently commands its own destiny, ensuring a peace that is both personal and profound. The greatest triumph is to build an empire within, from which all external victories flow.